Hello and welcome back to my channel. On this video, I'm going to be talking about all the books I hope to read in the month of November. And this is one of my favorite times of year to read. As I record this, we are actually getting the first snowfall here in Denver, so it's very cozy. And I am looking forward to a bunch of books that I can dive into in this next month. So I will share a bunch of books that I have on my list. These are books that just kind of caught my attention. Some of them are books I've been wanting to read for a long time. Some of them are relatively new. And then of course, at the end of the video, I will add 5 random books using my alphabet challenge letter to figure out what I'm going to read from what I already own. So let's dive in. So the first book I'm adding to my list is one of the only books I have not read on John Green's backlist. It is called Turtles All the Way Down. And I think the only thing I really know about this particular book is that it has representation of OCD, and I think it's an adult novel, and that's pretty much all I know. But I've read a lot of other stuff by John Green that I've really enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to picking that one up. I'm also going to add to my list Whale Fall by Daniel Kraus, and this is a book basically about, from what I understand, a man's experience of being trapped in a whale. That was kind of all I needed to know. I was able to get the audio from my library. I'm really curious how the author decides to do this. I'm wondering if it has a little bit of kind of like a Martian feel, which is basically, you know, a man trapped on another planet, and how is he gonna kind of solve these issues? Is it similar to that when the man gets trapped in a whale? I don't know, but I'm really curious about that one. I'm also adding to my list a book called All Downhill with You by Julia Olivia. This is a book that is the first in her Honeywood romance series, and this takes place in a theme park. I have seen these books everywhere, but I have not read anything by this author. She also recently launched a new series that is based off of Peter Pan, and it's a romance series based off Peter Pan. So I would love to kind of dig into her backlist a little bit before I read the newer stuff, and thought I would start with the first book in this series. Also adding to my list, a book called The Three Marriages. Subtitle is Reimagining Work, Self, and Relationship by David Whyte. This is a book I've tried to read in the past and I just couldn't get into it. It is kind of my nonfiction book for this month. November is sometimes called Nonfiction November. People like to read nonfiction in the month of November. And I just love this concept of the relationship between these three things. And I believe that David Whyte is a poet, so I think he kind of comes at this with a really interesting perspective. I don't know much more other than that, but I've been wanting to read this one for a while, so adding that to my list. Also adding to my list a book called Far from the Light of Heaven. This is by Tade Thompson, and I believe that this is primarily a sci-fi book. I have heard just amazing things, about this book. I don't know much about it. The book description says there's a colony ship that docks, having traveled light years to bring 1,000 sleeping souls to a new home among the stars. But when the first mate rouses, she discovers some of the sleepers will never wake. And there's an investigator. So it's kind of like a mystery set in space. And again, have heard just incredible things about it. So I'm looking forward to picking that up as well. I am also going to pick up, I think I have on my list here, the next 5 books in the K. Scarpetta series by Patricia Cornwell. I am getting very close to being done with the series if I keep on track, and that means like 5 books a month for the next couple months. And so I am on books 18 through 22. So book 18 in the series is called Port Mortuary. Book 19 in the series is called Red Mist. Then we move on to book 20 in the series, which is called The Bone Bed. Book 21 in the series is called Dust. And then book 22 in the series is called Flesh and Blood. So I'm going to try to basically binge 5 books in this series in the month of November. Probably not back to back, but what I've also found is that because the characters in this series are so familiar to me now, this is a series I can kind of listen to a little bit in the background while I'm doing other things, like doing dishes or laundry or things like that. Whereas some of the books I read, I feel like I have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on because it's like a new world or a new set of characters. And this is a little more familiar, so it's a little easier for me to do in the background. I also added to my list this month a book called Call It What You Want by Bridget Kemmerer. This is an author that I've just really enjoyed, and I have been working my way through her backlist. So the general premise of this book is that there's a main character whose dad is caught embezzling funds from a town, and he's a popular lacrosse player and becomes a social pariah. And then there's a female lead. It's kind of, I think this is like a YA romance, and she's a typical overachiever, but has a secret of her own after the pressure got to her last year. When her sister comes home from college pregnant, keeping it from her parents might be more than she can handle. And then those two are paired together on a calculus project. So I'm assuming kind of young adult romance, which Bridget Kemmerer does so well. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I also added Abby Jimenez's book, Yours Truly, which is the second book in her Part of Your World series. I read Part of Your World, I can't remember if it was early this year or last year, but I really enjoyed that one. And I don't even know, I just picked this one up. It was kind of like an auto pickup for me because I have enjoyed her work. It says that there is, okay, so there's a Dr. Brianna Ortiz's life is seriously flatlining. Her divorce is just about finalized. Her brother's running out of time to find a kidney donor, and that promotion that she wants is going to another doctor. And so this other doctor, I think, who's getting the promotion is actually starting to engage her through letters. So maybe this is epistolary, which I always enjoy. And so she starts to have a relationship with this other doctor, I think. So medical romance, I'm here for that. I also decided to add to my list a book called The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This is a book that I have heard also incredible things about. On Goodreads, it is 4.24 average stars, which is relatively high. This is a trilogy, and it is about a 17-year-old main character, Kiva, who works as a prison healer, and she's charged with keeping a rebel queen alive so that she can undergo a trial by ordeal. And it's a series of challenges. And it says that a coded message from her family arrives that says, "Don't let her die, we are coming." So the trials could kill the sickly queen. She risks her own life to volunteer in her place. So this is a book that I think is about like magical trials, which I think is super fun. And I've just heard incredible things. So I'm excited to pick that one up. I also saw somebody raving about another book online. And so I decided to pick this one up too. And add it to my list. It's called Invisible by James Patterson and David Ellis. I read another David Ellis book earlier this year. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it was called Get Closer. Let me see if I can look closer. And I really enjoyed it. It was very twisty. And somebody was raving about the second book in this series because this book Invisible is the first in a series. And so I was like, well, let me pick up the first one so I can get to the second one that someone was really loving. So the first book says, everyone thinks Emmy Dockery is crazy, obsessed with finding the link between hundreds of unsolved cases. Emmy has taken leave from her job as an FBI researcher. Now all she has are the newspaper clippings that wallpaper her bedroom and her recurring nightmares of an all-consuming fire. And then she has an ex-boyfriend who's a field agent. And then she finds a piece of evidence that they all can't ignore. And I think this sounds fascinating. So I'm actually like really looking forward to diving into that. I added another Kristen Hanna backlist to my list. It is The Nightingale, which I'm sure many of you have seen, heard of, if not read. It's very popular. And this takes place in the late 1930s in France. And I believe this is set, squarely in World War II, when the Nazis are invading. And I think that Kristen Hanna does some really interesting kind of historical fiction, but I've read more of her contemporary, so I'm interested in diving in and seeing what I think about that one. I also added to my list a book called The Last One by Will Dean, which purely for the premise, because I just thought it sounded interesting. There's a woman who goes on a cruise liner, and she like spends the evening with her boyfriend or her partner, and then she wakes up the next morning and he's not there, and the entire ship is empty. And then the story kind of goes on from there. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in seeing kind of what's going on there. So I put that on my list. Okay, and then I added a bunch of really long books. So we'll see how many of these I can actually get through. I added Lionel Shriver's The Post-Birthday World. This is a book that has been described as kind of like a sliding doors storyline. So if you're familiar with that film, it follows one character, but it takes her life in like two very different directions. And it shows what happened if she'd made like this choice versus if she'd made that choice. And my understanding is The Post-Birthday World does a very similar kind of motif. So I'm really interested in seeing how that turns out. I also added to my list a new book by Lauren Asher called Love Redesigned. And this is an author that I read earlier this year where she had kind of this billionaires romance trilogy. And that was my first kind of dipping my toe into the water of this subgenre of billionaire romances. This is a new series called Lakefront Billionaires. So I'm pretty sure it's following in the same steps as these other books. But I really did enjoy those other ones, and I thought I would try that one out. Also added to my list, Sword Catcher by Cassandra Clare. This is a new series for Cassandra Clare. I cannot get myself to read her earlier series, so I thought, let me try this new one. Let me see if I can actually get myself to read one of these books, because I want to experience this author and just kind of see what she's like. I have a couple box sets of her earlier series, and this one I think goes in just a different direction than what she's done in the past, so I'm excited to dig into that. I also added Stephen King's 11/22/63. This is probably the longest book that I have on my list, and it comes in at, let's see, looks like just shy of 900 pages. So I will probably try to grab that one on audio. And my understanding of this book in terms of what it covers is this is around the storyline of President Kennedy's death in November of 1963. And the premise of the book is, it says like the world changed after that happened. And the premise is, what if you could change it back? So it's a novel that is about a man who travels back in time to prevent the assassination. And following he's had these other kind of large novels, he's going back into this kind of like, it's basically like a historical reimagining of this time. And again, I've just heard really good things about it. So adding that to my list. And then the last book, which should not surprise you, that is going on my list for the month of November is, of course, Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is the second book in her series that started with Fourth Wing, which is about a group of students who are being trained to ride dragons, among other things, that everyone just has loved and really enjoyed. And so I'm really excited to do the second book in that particular series and see what I think about it. Okay, so now let me go ahead. I'm going to go into my Kindle because I have to figure out what books I'm going to be reading in the month of November. And I'm going to start by choosing a letter here. Now let me pick a random one. And the number or the letter I picked is I. I had to look in here to be like, what order is this in? So this is an I, not an H. And let me see what books I have that fall under I. And I'm going to do a quick scan here. And there are actually several that look interesting to me. Okay. I have to figure out what I actually have the time to read because some of these are quite long. So I'm just kind of scanning through and seeing what my options are here. Okay, so let me go back up to the top and see what I want to do. So I am going to start with, and I'm just checking to make sure I haven't already read this. Okay, I have not. I'm going to start with a book called If I Never Met You by Mary McFarlane. This is an author that I have read before and really enjoyed the other book that I read. And I think that this is a romance, kind of obvious from the cover of the book. The general premise is, it says there's a main character, Lori, who ends a partnership that's over a decade, and they work at the same law firm, and she has to see him regularly. And then I think he has a new girlfriend, and she becomes pregnant. So she is then trying to figure out who she can date because she has to maybe compete with this other situation with the ex-boyfriend. And it says that she has a chance encounter in a broken down elevator with the office playboy, and it opens up a new possibility. So, okay, that's the first one I'm going to add to my list, If I Never Met You. I am also going to add to my list what looks to be a thriller and it's called If I Die Tonight by Allison Galen. And it says, description is, late one night in a quiet Hudson Valley town, a distraught woman stumbles into the police station and lives are changed forever. She claims that a teenage boy stole her car, then ran over another young man who'd rushed to help. And it's not clear that like everything is as it seems. So definitely kind of like a thriller, maybe a psychological thriller. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that to my list as well. Okay, and then let's see. I am also going to add to my list, because I've been wanting to read this for a while, a book called Imaginable by Jane McGonigal. And the subtitle is this is How to See the Future Coming and Feel Ready for Anything, Even Things That Seem Impossible Today. So this is a book that I've read like a summary of it. Like I have a subscription service to like book summaries, and sometimes I will read summaries of books that are nonfiction. And that is one that I read a summary of and I found it really interesting. And so I am going to add that into what I'm reading as well. Okay, let me see what else I want to add here. I'm going to add a fantasy book. It is called The Iron King. It's probably 1,000,000 pages long, 420 pages. That's not too bad. Okay. And it says, enter a fantastical world of dangerous fairies, wicked princes, and one half-human girl who discovers her entire life is a lie. So it says, something has always felt slightly off in Megan Chase's life ever since her father disappeared when she was 6. 10 years later, when her little brother also goes missing, she learns the truth. She is the secret daughter of a mythical fairy king and a pawn in a deadly war. Okay, I'm gonna add that to my list as well. Can't go wrong with a new fantasy. And I've not read this author, Julie Kagawa is not somebody that I've read before. So I'm gonna add that to my list also. And the other one I'm gonna add is actually something I've had on my list to start for a long time. This is a mystery series. And the first book in the mystery series is called IQ. And I think there's 6 books in this series. And it says, a resident of one of LA's toughest neighborhoods uses his blistering intellect to solve the crimes the LAPD ignores. And I've heard that this is kind of a little bit like a Sherlock Holmes retelling, but I've never read one of these books. And it looks like it's by Joe, it might be Ide. I don't know if it's Ide. I don't think it's pronounced that way. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways. So I'm gonna take that book and also add it to my list for November as well. Okay, so that gives me 5. There's some really good things that I'm looking forward to there. I have a wonderful month of reading ahead, and I hope you will also let me know what you're thinking of reading in the month of November, and I'll check back at the end of this month and let you know what I was actually able to read. Until then, happy reading.